Yes.
All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started with the committee of the whole meeting, September 21st, 2022. And last council meeting that we did have, I wanted to, first and foremost, I wanted to discuss the convenience store legislation, which we've been posting a moratorium on it for the last almost year now. And I wanted to see if we can meet some common ground here and come up with some legislation regarding the convenience stores. So that's why I invited Commissioner Marcus Phillips of Codes, and I wish that UPD was here, but they're not here right now, so hopefully they will come in. But I'd like to open the discussion on this matter. We have a 3-month period now that we extended, and I'd like to get something done before the extension ends. So,
Frank, just to let you know, Chief is coming. He's just running late, so he will be here.
okay,
He's
that'd
just
be
gonna-
great
he's just
if
gonna
we
be
had
late.
any questions regarding, from a safety standpoint as well. So, Marcus, there's a couple questions I'd like to ask, but we put this moratorium on it because we felt, I think the council felt, and we've been getting a lot of calls, from constituents to say, boy, there's a lot of them in the city, and boy, some of them don't take care of, their properties. They are open late. We get all these little complaints about it. So I understand there's about 64 or 65 convenience stores, non-gas stations,
Well,
correct?
between the definitions that we have in our zoning code of convenience stores and smoke shops,
Okay,
the number we have right now is 62.
62?
Subject to change, because they gotta meet that specific definition, so all the inspections have to be done. There might be one that we missed, but we tried, we think there's 62.
Okay, so by having this moratorium, they cannot open any other stores going forward until we make a decision on whether to release?
They,
Okay.
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, they have not, since the first moratorium,
Okay.
done anything. The only ones that were allowed, as I had mentioned, were any ones before you had done it, where it had already started the process. But since then, Codes has not issued any permits. They have not,
In fact, we've shut a couple down.
Yeah.
On Blaker Street, that was supposed to be a smoke shop. The one Joe had talked about was that Mohawk Street.
Yeah.
We've shut 2 or 3 down.
So once they're shut down, they can't reopen in that
They can't be
location?
open. You can't open a new convenience store, so we stopped them from opening. But one time, but there has been some complaints, because a couple popped up, one on Court Street and one on Ben Street. But those were already in the works. So what's in the works, the way law defined that at the time, was purchase the building for the purposes of before the moratorium. And so even if they didn't have any permits, even if they didn't, they had the intent of becoming convenience stores that was declared in some city action before, and both of these places had permits. So, they started before, it just took them, they
Right, they
waited.
applied before the moratorium existed,
They
yeah.
waited.
Yeah. And I know I see some legislation tonight, the 2,000-foot rule where you can't have them within 2,000 feet next to each other.
Yeah.
Is that, we're enforcing that, or we have to enforce it as a council tonight?
It's,
Is that,
We have to call for a public hearing first.
Okay.
Councilman Durango, after the public hearing, if the council sees fit, we can make it.
and then we could
It
enforce
used
it?
to be a law, I think it's a good law, people support it. The complication with the law, before, and I'm sure it will be again, is that the zoning board grants variances, and most of the time the variances are based on contradicting parts of the city code. Because somebody will say, so a convenience store is neighborhood retail, so neighborhood retail is a permitted use. And they say, well, none within 2,000 feet, but then there's laws that say you can pass it down to the next owner when you sell it under the old use. And if it was the use before, it's the use now. So if they're a continued retail use, they've been granted variances. And so everywhere where there's a storefront was retail. And so they passed the 2,000-foot law, but all these places have variances because there's grandfather clauses.
Right.
Huh?
So it was basically useless.
well, it was just how the code was passed.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's,
That's what I was just gonna ask, if we pass this now and there's something within 2,000 feet, it automatically stays, you're not gonna change it and say you can't state that, right?
well, but
Well,
Joe, when you pass the zoning law, right? You guys said that it could have the same use as before the zoning law if it's the same owner or if it's sold to the next.
Correct, grandfather.
So, if they say, okay, you're saying not within 2,000 feet, but this one says that I can continue a use, then which one, how do you come down on that? Those two laws contradict each other.
The new one opening up.
Yeah, anything new.
Yeah, but they'll say it's a continued use, because if it's retail, it's neighborhood retail. If it's retail,
But there should be no continued use, especially that you passed a new zoning
but the
code.
zoning law says there is.
The new zoning code.
Yeah.
It wasn't the zoning.
This is a nightmare.
Okay, let me say this. All right, so we get through the 2,000 foot. Obviously, you can't shut one person down and keep the other because they're within the 2,000 foot range. But is there, if we have 62 left in our city, is there a number that we could put on to say we're not gonna go past 62 anymore? So there'll be no new convenience stores. As they shut down, the number would decrease.
So that's
Is
a
that,
legal question.
is that
It's something I've asked, but lawyers, it's a legal
the
question.
attorney? I mean, is there, could we put a number on the amount of convenience stores in the city, within the city limits?
I mean, as Marcus said, I've had this discussion with him. I'd be a little leery of that. I think you draw some unconstitutional issues if you do that.
Okay.
So that is not something that I recommend, and I would ask the judge as far as his comments on that, as far as limiting the, number of neighborhood retail stores that you have. So I would say, just on its face, just limiting them is unconstitutional.
Okay. Yeah, Celeste?
So in terms of that, I mean, I guess this is a general kind of question about how you approach city law and stuff like that. A little bit leery, we might drive some unconstitutional problems. I say, well, let's do it. And if eventually a court says, no, you can't do it, then, okay, then we live with those consequences then, right? I mean, I guess, and that's just sort of a, like, how risk averse are we, right? Is a one.
I mean, that's not gonna be my opinion.
Right.
But
Well, and I would, and I'm not, but I'm addressing the council, right?
Right.
So how risk averse do we want to be? When a lawyer says this might bring a lawsuit, I'm like, that's not, bringing a lawsuit isn't the worst thing that's ever happened to a city. And if a court ruled in the favor of the person who brought the lawsuit, well, then we would have to comply with the court. I don't know. It's about how risk averse we're willing
Yeah.
to be as a council.
Understood.
I guess I should just clarify, I wasn't saying whether or not it would bring, because I don't know exactly what you would do, and that would, I think, depend on mine and judge's legal opinion as far as what specifically you do, whether or not it's constitutional or not. And I'm just basing that, if you're strictly limiting them, I'm gonna say it's unconstitutional, and you're gonna have some serious issues with that.
All right.
I get it.
One other question I had. So if we lift the moratorium and we go by the guidelines of the 2,000 foot rule, we could have 50 more come in, and we can't stop it.
So
As long as they meet the criteria,
Right.
but they have to be, they can't be within 2,000 foot.
correct.
So any new store that is within 2,000 foot of another store, they're not gonna be allowed to open.
See, now,
So that
Mr. Chair.
I wonder what 2,000 feet adds up to. Like, I wish somebody could do the topographical map. Hmm?
Mr. Chair, 1/10 of the mile.
from,
But
Right,
it's,
so
street-
if
but
you-
it's street, it's not building to building, it's by way of linear.
Right, but what I want to know is, let's hypothetically, if we adopted a 2,000 foot rule, how many would that allow in the city?
from Oneida Square to
Right.
Munson Williams is 500 feet.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna refer to the judge right now and let him make some comments, maybe help us out in this.
I'll briefly answer one first question, when I have attention, everyone. First of all, it is one of the things the council, all government people do, is avoid lawsuits, number one, because lawsuits mean the use of taxpayers' dollars to fight the lawsuits. That's number one. So the old saying in laws, never buy a lawsuit if you don't have to, number one. Number two, it was my understanding that the 2,000 foot rule had a purpose. It, by the very nature of the restriction, it does limit how many you can possibly have, because you may have reached the optimum anyway because of the distance rule. Now, the distance rule, that might even be challenged, but I think you've got a better chance of the distance rule for a lot of reasons. And I think the Corporation Counsel's office, when I talked to Mr. to Stephanie and Charlie Brown, we pretty much agreed that that probably isn't going to bring anything. But the other thing might, whenever you try to limit something, there always might be an applicant who is the 53rd person, and he has to bring a lawsuit, you see? So I think the distance rule does what you've always been asking for, and we could have done that a long time ago, because I amended that a long time ago to the 2000 rule. Also, we never know the exact answer to any question, but I take a very restricted view about the common council doing things that might bring legal action, because I don't defend the legal action. The Corporation Counsel's office does if you get sued, and that really means that when the Corporation Counsel's office tells you they prefer you not do something, they are actually advising you that they think it's not in the best interest of the cities and the taxpayers. I like the 2000 rule. I don't think that thing, I think that could survive a challenge, because it has to do with crowding, it has to do with oversaturation, and it also has to do with where's the driving need to have more, you see? So I think you could, that one, I never had any problem with that one. But when you do something specific, and the 53rd person comes along because you said 52, that's it. Well, the 53rd person has a great site, and he has to sue. And who caused that? You did. Why? Because then you have to defend why. What's the magic number 52? You can understand how the Corporation Counsel is saying to himself, I don't know how that becomes the magic number. So, as a matter of practicability, we don't advise that to go that way. And of course, remember, as Stephanie and I were talking earlier, because there's a couple of amendments in here tonight to the zoning law. We, as attorneys, propose we do not dispose. That's your job. And we do not supplant our opinion into your minds as something you have to do. All we do is tell you what the guesswork is. But I never, ever encourage the creation of a lawsuit because as taxpayers, they have to pay for it. And it can go on not only at the local level, it could go to the appellate division, it could go on up to the Court of Appeals, it could take years and tie up the whole question and cost a lot of money.
Okay, I know
Frank?
Colosimo wanted to say something, but I just want to say one thing. The convenience stores, I mean, they're not all bad apples. I mean, it's needed throughout the city. A lot of people don't have vehicles. You know, a lot of people are working, they come home late at night, whatever it may be, and they want to go pick up something quick. I'm okay with it. It's the bad apples, the ones that are doing illegal activity, such as selling cigarettes just by one cigarette at a time, and things of that nature, or maybe dealing, you know, or have loitering, you know, in front of the store. So there are some bad apples out there, but I'm not against the total of convenience stores. Just want to let you know that. I just want to make sure that we control it. We make sure it's safe. It's a safe environment, and I think codes would agree with me that that's what we want to do, especially when you're open late at night and you have the windows all covered with advertisements and everything, and there's only one sole worker in there. You never know what could happen. You never know what could happen late at night, you know, and people have, you know, different ideas. So we want to try to clean that up, make sure that it's visible from the outside. So when the police department drives by, and just make sure that everything is okay. Maybe have a set of cameras in there that it could be hooked up to the city, or at least have access by the police officers if something does occur. Things of that nature, more of a safety issue than anything. That's you know, one of my concerns as far as the convenience stores as well. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, just very quick. I think the 2000 rule is, 2000-foot rule is very good too, going forward. But let me ask you a question. When you tell me the way it's set up now, that one owner grandfathered in the other one and this and that that's currently happening, do we have paperwork showing that they were grandfathered in? What do you have?
Well, they go to the zoning board of appeals. So there's stores that literally opened within 2,000 feet of each other, all throughout the city, during the time when there was a 2,000-foot restriction.
Because the ZBA allowed it, right?
Because the ZBA
Gave
allowed
them
it.
a
you're
use
next.
variance.
They allowed it. based
So
on-
you're saying, hang on one second, you're saying two different things now. Originally, you said the reason, I'm just confused.
Yeah.
Originally, you said that
Celeste.
if they had a store and they gave it to the new person bought it, they could be grandfathered into the 2,000 foot rule.
Marcus is referring to under the old zoning code, which had a 2,000-foot
Right,
restriction.
so there was an old zoning code with a 2,000-foot rule. A lot of them got variances from the zoning board of appeals.
When you get,
I was characterizing their argument for why to give them an appeal, because it's in contradictory with continued use. And so the zoning board looks at it and says, you're right.
So so if it went in front of the zoning board and it gave them approval,
that'll
there-
be documented,
there has to be documentation that they were there.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so,
And there has to be a public hearing.
okay, and
And
so
and
I
all-
wasn't
and all
around.
you as counselors are made aware of the agenda, so if
Okay.
you have a concern about a particular application, that's your opportunity to come in and.
Okay, so in the past,
forward,
in the
yeah.
past, and I wasn't around here, and I'm not sure, maybe Mark or Sam was. So in the past, when this was going on under this old zoning code, that we said we had a 2,000-foot rule, okay? And they went in front of the zoning board, and then they had to come back in front of the council again, and
No.
No? No,
Once they got approved, they were approved, that's it.
okay. And so it was basically useless, because
But if the
why would
zoning-
the zoning
The
board
zoning-
just approve
But if
this
the
all the
zoning board
time?
doesn't hear anybody speaking out against it, then the zoning board is likely to grant the variance.
They have-
However, if
they
there's
have-
council people that
Eh,
feel it's a bad idea and show
Right.
up at the zoning board, the
Right.
zoning board probably isn't going to grant the variance.
But wouldn't the zoning board say it's a bad idea too?
They have denied them, and they have granted them. They have a set criteria that they have to review to grant a use variance. So, but they do take input from neighbors and,
So
other.
when I get the email about zoning, okay, the first thing I do, I pick it up and I read it. And if it's something in my area, okay, I either call the zoning board, I call Patty, or I call whoever to see what's going on, okay? So, when you come, as far as you go to the zoning board meeting, I can't even speak. We're not even allowed to speak.
if it's a public
If it's a
hearing-
public hearing,
Yeah.
but I can't come there and just say, hey, I'm Councilman Beatrice, and they're putting an 8-foot fence up and I don't want it there.
You could write a letter, they would take in your
As-
letter
Yeah.
into consideration.
Yes,
read
as
that
long,
into
and
the
as
record.
long as
Right,
they're
but I'm
having,
talking at the actual meeting.
Right,
as
but
long
they
as
would
there's
do
a
that.
public hearing, yes, you can.
Public hearing,
you
but
can
that's,
comment.
that's at the next, the first time it comes, it's not there. It's
No,
not a
it-
public hearing.
No,
It's-
in front of most zoning board issues, this is separate from the planning board.
Right.
Most zoning board issues, when they come first on the agenda, it's a public hearing on that date.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we only see these applicants one time.
Okay, because I know that the times I went, we weren't allowed to talk.
As long as it's a public hearing, and maybe you're thinking of planning board. Planning board is a separate procedure because sometimes they can come in front of the board numerous times before a public hearing is held.
Okay.
But if
Okay,
you send
next
them,
up
if you
is-
send them a letter, they would read it
Yeah.
into the record.
Or you
of
could
the-
even
Hey,
send an
Councilperson
email.
Colosimo
Yes.
Testa, you're up.
Thank
You have
you.
the floor.
All right, so let's go back. So say we implement the 2,000-foot rule, and you were talking about the exception of somebody being grandfathered in. What if we went to that part of the section and put, the only exception to not being grandfathered in is if the continued use is for a convenience store?
I'm not a lawyer, so.
No,
I
I'm
probably-
just
I probably
saying.
shouldn't have- No, I probably shouldn't have said that because here's the thing, right? I think a convenience store, I think we're confusing convenience stores and smoke shops, which are getting permitted.
I'm not confused by you.
No, I know, but as a body, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
specifically, which are permitted, that's a license.
Right.
To have a convenience store or a smoke shop is to get the license.
Right.
But it's in the category of neighborhood retail.
I
which is a much
understand that,
broader
and
category.
that's what kind of screwed us as far as the original convenience store legislation that we had implemented. When they changed that zoning code, it did change a lot of that neighborhood retail type use. So for example, like a convenience store was on Bleecker Street. This council actually extended that neighborhood use retail where M&M Cleaners used to be and allowed a convenience store to be put in that location as well. And that's where I had brought up several issues in regards to that because that was around the corner from my house. Luckily, so far, the guy that runs that convenience store is very nice, and I talked to him and I threatened his life. But other than that,
I think,
Nothing.
I'm kidding. I have a very good working relationship with him, and he understands. He actually lives across the street from where the convenience store is.
just to clarify, I think Marcus's point, he's also referring to the definition of neighborhood retail
Right.
can include your average Joe Smo person who wants to sell T-shirts and just T-shirts that he makes.
Correct.
So that's,
I
we have
understand that.
definitions of what a neighborhood
So
retail
what I
encompasses.
would suggest is maybe taking what we had in the old zoning code and making a new amendment to the new zoning code, specifically keeping that convenience store legislation in there, because I think that that addressed every single concern that every person in this room has.
Well, but my general concern is under that code, there's stores that come up next to each other.
Right, there's specific though legislation that you would have to add into the new zoning code that states convenience stores, because there's a definition of convenience stores, allowing that into that code, putting that old code back into the new code, specifically addresses that
The
issue.
general idea for a new law to address this problem.
It's
and
not-
It is what it is the same law that didn't address it last time.
But it did. It did. We didn't,
Well,
we
you're
don't have
saying
these.
it didn't, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
No, but we didn't, I mean, we had problems. I'm not saying that we didn't, but it still satisfied the need with the 2,000-foot rule, so on and so forth.
When I say problems, I'm looking from a code perspective. My biggest code problem is convenience stores.
Right,
Right? With convenience stores in the United Square.
right,
There's 3 within 2,000 feet. of
right,
each other.
right,
2 of them have variances.
right.
Right, I mean, the,
But,
Can we go?
And let me ask you a question. I mean, those convenience stores have been there for,
right.
No, but no, 2 of them are newer.
but when were they opened up?
Since the 2,000 foot law, 2 of them have variances.
Well, that's obviously up to the zoning code.
Well, that's,
The zoning
part of
board.
That's been a while,
So-
that's been a long time, they've
Well,
been there a
well,
while.
okay.
They've been there for 10
We've
years.
done the fire
10
department
Yeah,
together.
right, right.
But you're putting
But
a tool in
that
now.
2,000-foot rule wasn't there 10 years ago.
Well,
All right. The next-
But that's all, I just wanna
It
finish.
was though.
Not that, no, we
When 2 of the
amended,
stores opened, it
we
was.
amended it, I think, back in 2013.
But
the
I
last
know 'cause I've
amendment
seen
on
the
that
variances
convenience
that it
store
was 10 years
legislation.
ago. 2 of those stores opened since the 2,000 foot law.
No, not
And,
us.
and went to the zoning board to get the variances,
Yes.
and they were granted.
Well, then shame on the zoning board then. You can't point the
Well-
fingers at the legislative body because the zoning boards are approving their variance. Then shame on the zoning
But
board.
that's a different argument.
I'd keep the
Right, it
moratorium
is.
for another 30 years if it was up to me.
Yeah.
I mean, just keep extending it. I mean,
I
what?
know, but we have to
You
act,
can't do
we
that.
can't
You
just,
can't.
you can't just
Why
keep it,
not?
kick the can down the
You're
road. We
already
gotta-
pressing
have to
a
start
reasonable amount of
somewhere.
time.
Right.
You know,
next up-
can I ask this gentleman a question?
Yeah, one question,
I mean, you can't
and then
blame the
Councilperson
legislative body
Aiello
for
is
the zoning
next.
board approving these things.
right.
Do
You're
you-
not following rules.
You're not the police chief, and you don't know necessarily what happens in regard to calls.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I know what.
But I know this. When you are talking about specific businesses and all that, and restrictions and all that, at some point, if you get to the courthouse, it's a different ballgame. You have to show proof that backs up your argument. I'll bet you that there are more calls of Price Chopper by the police department about incidents probably than a lot of other
But
places.
you're talking police calls, not cold
Yeah,
calls.
I mean, they live up at Price.
Yeah, but you're not talking about-
Just a minute, just
Okay.
what I'm getting at. I'm saying to you, I've been listening to this argument for a long time,
Right.
and you have to have statistics and solid proof, not conjecture, when you're trying to restrict or do something in the courthouse. And I'm saying to you, you keep targeting this business, and there are ways to control it. Like, as Councilwoman pointed out, we had a restriction of distance before. Wrote a new law and wasn't there. Now you're putting it back. I think there's just so far you can go, because then if you do something that targets them and affects them and affects their license, you have to prove that there is something wrong that they're doing, not only in the general sense, but the particular person that you're trying to not license again. You see what I mean?
But with
You
all due
have to have
respect,
proof.
with all due respect,
I
I'm
mean,
the
you-
codes commissioner.
I mean, I
You're-
just don't
you're-
understand this argument to a point with the
Judge, just
council.
let me make my point.
Commissioner, are you telling the council and me as Now, you're talking about the attorneys, what we think about. Are you telling me that they are a menace in the community and should be
I'll tell you
eliminated?
if you let me tell you.
Huh?
I'll tell you if you let me tell you.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Okay. I'm the code commissioner. I get cold calls about the convenience stores in Oneida Square 5 times a week.
We're in Oneida Square?
In Oneida Square.
Oh, yeah.
5 times a week. So I don't know how many police calls they get. I don't get any cold calls about price shopping.
Right,
They
Yeah.
are.
right.
Several.
So if they're breaking the rules, then we have you have the right to shut them down if they're doing something illegal
That's what the new law is designed to do. The problem with that,
with the point system and all that, okay.
the problem with that is that I'm pulling it from the owner and I'm not pulling it from the building. So then they just switch owners.
Yeah. So maybe we have to make an adjustment, but Councilperson Aiello.
Thank you.
She's been waiting, go ahead.
I guess when looking at the zoning and we say we want to do something just against convenience stores, I lean more towards, is there any legality or ability to just phase out of grandfather clauses? Can you just give people like enough time to adapt? I don't care if it's 10 years, but of something so we're not in these positions. Or
6 months.
is that
Yeah.
what it is? Or that's what you want?
You can make it anything you want.
So it is a thing, and I would prefer that route. But at the same time, with these convenience stores, like how do you decide which one stays and which one goes? So if it is all phased out, I think that's a not something we'll probably solve here tonight, but that's a concern to me.
It's a great question.
The only thing I would add is if you phase them out, and let's say you completely prohibit neighborhood retails within the city of Utica, they still have an opportunity to apply for a variance.
I'm not even asking. I just want everybody to go by the zoning ordinance now, the codes and everything as it is now. I don't know if it does end up into phasing out, but
You're saying add a
it's weird.
No, and she's saying is that they won't be grandfathered in, but there is a 6 month rule to that grandfather clause.
Okay.
Which, if we made it
The grandfather,
20 days for convenience stores or 2 weeks for them to reapply for a permit, it might just limit them that amount of time in order to reapply for that permit. So I mean, that's something that could be a possibility that we could do. That's why I said with the exclusion of convenience stores to
Gotcha.
that
All right,
clause.
are you,
so,
you got it?
Yeah,
You
that'd
good?
be fine. Thanks.
so I have a couple
Councilperson
questions.
Friend.
One is, and this is just a very general question, could we make it the land and not the owner? Don't answer yet. I do think that the zoning board of appeals is a big part of our problem here. The little convenience store on Sunset at the end of Sunset, which is a terrible problem for that neighborhood, had to go to the ZBA. I remember it clearly because I was running for office but not in office, and the councilman at the time did a weak job of arguing that this would be bad for the neighborhood. And the zoning board of appeals let it in, and even let it in even though one person applied for the zoning variance and another person like a week later opened the store. Like they did a switcheroo in terms of who was actually making the application. And in my opinion at the time, I went to that hearing, the zoning board of appeals did a terrible job of actually like responding to good arguments. I mean, their argument was, what was it? He had already made some investments in the business even though he didn't have the right to own it. So we can't really turn him down now. And I'm like, yes, watch us, do it. So, I mean, so my question, general question is how can we as the council, or is there some way by which we can limit the zoning board of appeals, the parameters in which they can grant variances? Because they're granted, that's the Oneida Square problem, that's the Roosevelt Ave problem.
You took that out when you changed a lot of that. Usually the council would approve. I mean, I guess the zoning is the big process that the council's involved in. And we took that component away from us by allowing, the zoning to be so broad in its definition.
So could we instead then, could we have a permit process that involves coming to the council for a permit?
I mean, I don't think you could.
Why not?
Because you would have to change the actual zoning. That's the
Well,
only
no, but you
time
can
that
change
council.
the zoning, there's nothing written in stone about the zoning ordinance, the new zoning ordinance.
Right,
could
but
change
would
it.
we would just be overseeing what the zoning board would approve. Right, and we can't overstep our boundaries. That's why we establish those boards, because you try and limit government and allow them to do their job
Yeah.
as trained and paid people.
Okay, I got, councilperson from,
Good?
yeah, at large.
So I got a you said, a point system. So the question I have is when they, say you shut them down, they get a new
Could
owner.
you speak into the mic, please?
Right.
They get a new owner, and you can't do nothing. It's just constantly going. So when before they open a business underneath their name, don't they have to get approval from the city, some type of permits or anything?
Not from the city.
No, nothing that they can actually do anything in the city, nothing.
Grandfathered in for 6 months.
Now, when you say the point system, does that include your calls, the fire calls, the police calls, and how
Yeah,
many
there's a
points, how many points does it take, I guess, to get the lollipop, you know? I don't know, you know?
There's,
But,
yeah, 24, there's a different, like, point for each thing. It's written in your legislation. There's
Yeah.
various points. And if they have so many violations or police calls or things happen in their property, then you go to the, then they're entitled to a hearing and you can pull the permit.
now, has that ever, it should have happened by now if it hasn't happened.
No, it hasn't happened yet.
So no one's followed through with it then?
Well,
No, they just started the process of licensing.
And that circles around to, you know,
Right.
closing
And
them
we
down at
just
10
hired a
o'clock
few more
in
codes
the evening.
officers to help
And
help
just
out.
think, I mean, we had COVID
yeah.
in between, so there's a lot of stuff, so.
I think it'd be helpful to give a general overview. So the law was passed, I think, last year, in February of 2021. It's a new duty for codes officers. To do these inspections is a new duty for codes officers. So that becomes a union question, and I have to negotiate with the union to give them the new duty, and I have to give them some benefit. Rather than give a benefit to every codes officer, I made it a promotional position. Then they have to civil service test them for the position. And then I have to hire another codes officer to replace that codes officer, and then they have to become certified. So we're just getting into establishing all the license. Now every store has a copy of the license application. We got about a third of them that are paid and in licensed. I don't think the licensing itself will be done until the next 60 days.
So, you know, you see you go there 5 times a week, you know, I know you may be exaggerating, we're 2 or 3, whatever.
I don't think they're exaggerating.
But after a month, I mean, that's, you know, just going one time, that's a point, ain't it?
One of the issues that you can't solve here, and I'm not asking you to solve, I'm not a counsel, I don't mean to advocate for specific legislation, and I'm sorry if I do, but one of the things that is not your problem, that's my problem, is there's violations that come from a convenience store that aren't on the convenience store's property. So people are littering in front of the house. Like, Oneida Square, we'll say an example, I'll say specific businesses, because this is where I've been. Palermo's might have litter in their parking lot. None of the litter is coming from Palermo's.
Right, needles, things.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not coming from Palermo's, it's got stuff, you know where it was sold. So one of the problems is, they could keep their actual property within codes, but they're still creating a nuisance that's requiring a city response.
Gotcha.
So with the police, I don't know what the police calls are every time they show up there, I mean, you know, for whatever, disorderly conduct within the store or, you know.
It's in the law, I'm not familiar with the police.
But I'm just curious, I mean, we're spending so much time there, as we say, and they're still staying open. It doesn't make sense after a while. You know, and that circles around to, 10 o'clock at night. When do we close them down? Do they stay open to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning still? I mean,
I mean, that's
That brings a good question. Can we put a time limit on when they could close and reopen in the morning?
they're already
Just a question for corporate counsel.
already open.
So I gave this opinion, you have some authority under your general police powers to regulate the hours of operation. That being said, I did some extensive research, I could not find a single city that did such, number one, and there's not a lot of case law to support that. So I would be very, very leery of doing anything about limiting the number of hours. That being said, you run, I think, less issues with putting in something where if they want to stay open later, they would need to either add that to their permit or do something else to request to be open for
Yeah.
later
24/7,
hours or
whatever
whatever,
they do.
correct.
but going back, I'm going to interrupt because we kind of
Go ahead, you
been
have the
running
floor.
with this thing for a couple of years. But the police officers are constantly going there after midnight, constant calls and stuff. I mean, one's enough's enough. I mean, you can charge them another $100 for an extra couple hours of, whatever they want to do. They're going to pay it because they'll make that within 5 minutes if they're doing something illegal out of there. But after a while, the police department has to, we have a lot of calls here. I mean, one's enough's enough.
It's in the abatement process.
So, I mean, I understand where you're getting there, and I totally understand what you're saying. But one's enough's enough. I mean, we're using all these assets constantly in Oneida Square for these stores or whatever other stores, I mean, when's enough enough? I mean, when's it, how do we fix it at that point? Or we just,
I can't give you an answer.
I mean, does the chief of police make a
They have to
memo?
shut the building down.
Yeah, the permit is with the owner. This is all a permit system.
So why can't we make the permit with the land?
Yeah, are you complete?
I'm complete.
Okay. Councilperson Friend and then Councilperson Beatrice.
So why can't we make the permit with the land?
I don't know.
Because the landowner's not the applicant for the planning board to
Well,
approve it.
land isn't quite what, yeah, but, I mean, but Marcus was saying earlier that part of what happens is they just switch owners, right? So they get their brother-in-law to come on as the owner and, you know,
But they say that's discriminatory because they're renting the property, it's a commercial property, and if I wanna rent it, why should they pay for the sins of the previous guy? And so now you're taking a commercial property and you're telling the commercial property that it can't rent its space for the purpose it was intended to.
I think
What's
we
that?
just revert back to the old legislation.
So,
That's less bad.
a couple of things very quickly. So what Katie talked about is getting rid of the grandfather clause within 6 months. So if you ever did something like that, you're saying a store that's been open for 5 years, you're gonna get rid of that grandfather clause and that store's gonna have to close?
No.
What is it you're saying?
The grandfather clause just allows the same use permit. So for example, if it's an auto-related business, they sell their building. The next 6 months, an auto-related business can go in there without having to go through the zoning board, okay?
Okay.
What it does, and you would have to limit it just specifically to, I guess, convenience stores, because it sometimes does take 6 months for a building such as an auto-related business to sell. So you wouldn't really wanna change that, cause then the people have to go through the process of going through the application for the grandfather clause. So you might wanna just take the exception with the 6 months clause and make it just towards convenience stores or smoke shops and limit that amount of time for that grandfather clause to 2 weeks instead of 6 months.
And I think I completely overplayed that point.
Okay.
My only point was that was an argument that could go before the.
That's a
Okay,
separate.
so I have the floor, I have the floor right now. So let me ask you this question too. You're the codes guy.
Right.
Okay? You know it's a problem we had there, correct?
Yeah.
With these stores. What do you recommend?
Well,
Is there
what I
something that we can do?
recommend people think is wrong. I mean, I think, like, I don't understand how you can't build a multiple family house in an R1 district, right? So you restrict something in a district. I don't understand how you can't restrict convenience stores. I don't understand what the difference is. You restricted chickens, right? Your city, you're a council, why can't we restrict things? Since when did that become
I agree,
not a part of zoning?
110%.
So why
Well,
can't we?
restricting what way, Marcus? Be specific. Remember?
No, I'm saying restrict the amount. Like, hey, in this district, we can only handle this much.
So then why can't we do that?
I don't know.
I think
The
they're
lawyer
saying
just
that,
told us
he's
we
just
can't.
saying, don't put a specific number on it, either make it 1,000 feet or make it
2,000.
2,000 feet.
Do the math and
But
figure
the-
out
the
what would the
1,000
feet need to be to keep it to 60.
Right, but the 2,000 foot rule sounds like it's a good thing if it's enforced. It seems to me everything here is not enforced. And I'm not saying it against you, like even right now, we started February 2021. When we go in your office, and I know you're just hiring people, and do you have anything from February 21 to September 22? Anything with points? Do you have anything documented, anybody, any store right now? You just said they call.
They
and
closed a
again,
couple
I'm not
down.
pointing at you,
Yeah.
But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, you said you can call us 5 times a week.
I do, but.
Do you have anything documented showing you have those?
No, because you don't understand what I'm saying, because I don't have all the permits in, so then it's unequal enforcement. So in other words, right now, the way that we're doing it is to try to abate them quicker to get it. If I only have 21 permits in, and I know there's 62 businesses that need to be permitted, right? And then I'm only enforcing the point system on those 21, and not the other 40 that don't yet have permits. I can't do that because that's unequal
Well,
enforcement.
why don't they all have permits yet?
Because the process, I haven't been able to get the system in place to deliver permits yet. I think it'll take about 60 more days. I have an officer that's appointed whose whole sole responsibility is to do it. It's what he wakes up and goes to sleep doing every day and night. He used to be the codes officer in Cornhill. I couldn't pull him out of Cornhill to have him do the store permits until I got another officer to replace him.
And on the same topic, in the zoning board, I think it's the council's people's responsibility too. If it's there and it's something in your area and you don't like, they should be there at that meeting and try to stop it, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And my point.
I think we
sounds
should,
like-
I think we should highlight on the agenda, convenience stores,
Right.
district,
Well, you
council
did- she does
person,
send
so.
it, they send it.
I know, but sometimes you do oversee it.
Right. I mean,
Right.
and it sounds to me in the past when all
Red
this was
flag.
going on.
Red flag it.
Nobody was, wherever district that was, nobody was fighting them stores from going there.
I mean, they could, some people came against the one in Sunset. You have no idea, like, the zoning board's gonna do what the zoning board's gonna do. And that's not, I realize, that's not your guys' purview. I still don't understand, yes, I still don't understand why I can't just say, I got one code officer doing this whole thing. I don't wanna put 100 buildings on one guy. I'm only gonna put 62 buildings on one guy.
Right.
That's what I think is an appropriate ratio of city resources to stores. I don't understand, we restrict other things. It used to be cabin houses. Only some people could have cabin houses.
Right, but you're restricting it total, not in the monetary amount, like not, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, let's restrict convenience stores, fine, oh, I'm fine with that.
Right.
But you're not limiting, like, you're not restricting, like, the number of chickens you can have in the city, like, how do you say, oh, that person can have 13 chickens?
But in a
that
zone.
person- No, I know, but that's what I mean, like, I understand the monetary. I think that's why how you get away with it is the 1,000-foot.
Yeah, I think what we should
Do you
do,
get what I'm saying? Cause then you're
No, no,
not.
I
Is
get
have
what
the
you're, I
public
get what you're
hearings,
saying, and I think everybody else in the
adopt the
whole room agrees.
2,000-foot rule, lift the
I just
moratorium.
don't understand how we can't say in a neighborhood mixed use, like she's gonna ban gas stations, right? And I get it, they're in total, but there's already some in there. So I don't understand why you couldn't do the same thing for convenience stores that you could do for gas stations.
I don't think we can do that.
But you can
It
do it for
still
gas.
has to go through the
Right,
process.
but you understand what I'm saying? Like, some things in zoning are not allowed in zones.
Right.
But
So
with
you're saying
convenience-
take convenience stores out of the neighborhood retail,
Out of the zone.
Out of the zone.
And then the ones that are there.
but why haven't we done that then? So that's all we have to do is
legally
remove
can
the
we?
name-
That's the
And the ones that are
question.
there are there.
So that's, okay, so we'll take the neighborhood, we'll take the neighborhood retail use, remove convenience stores out of there, also add in the 1,000-foot restriction, and then limit the grandfather system with regards to convenience.
And the ones that are there are
All right,
existing.
hang on, I gotta read that down.
But they're saying that it's illegal. I might be having you.
All right, hang on, so let's start this over again, because this is.
It sounds straightforward.
This is a pretty simple solution. So you take convenience stores out of neighborhood mixed use or neighborhood retail, neighborhood mixed use,
Well,
okay?
They're allowed in other areas.
Then you,
They're allowed in other areas too, though.
which ones?
Several.
Like, I know, but I can't think of it like off the top of my, like commercial.
Central Business District.
Industrial.
Urban mixed use.
I'm pretty sure they're only not allowed in 2 areas.
And residence in R1.
So then you're
I
gonna have to
think-
remove them out of every single one. All right,
What
that's
I-
fine. So any part of the zoning code. That's
Better
allowed.
finish your notes and then we'll call it quits
So
in this
okay,
session.
so that's, and then we're gonna add, if that's allowed, 2,000 foot rule. And then, what was the last one? Limiting grandfather use, grandfather clause with convenience stores. Smoke shops are convenience stores, are they consider the same thing?
It
as
says,
smoke
well,
shop?
for the permitting process, they are.
They are,
I mean,
okay.
they're not the same thing, but it
Okay.
says smoke shops and
It's
convenience.
For the
Smoke shops and
permitting, but
convenience store.
not in the zoning code, in the use table.
Not in the
Okay,
use
all
table.
right,
Because
okay.
it's all there.
Okay, we're good on that. I just have Councilperson Burmaster. Go ahead, you have the floor, and then we're gonna call it quits.
Well, you said you want to limit the amount of stores at 2,000 feet. Why don't you increase the footage to the 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and that would less the amount of stores within that area?
Wait, say that again?
Make
Make it a bigger difference between the length of where the store is from 2,000 to
You
3,000.
would have to limit
And,
it.
and that would be
Less than that.
limiting the amount of stores that would be allowed
You
in
wouldn't
that.
wanna increase it, you would wanna decrease it.
No, you'd wanna increase it.
You wanna make a longer distance
You want a
between
wider.
them.
You'd wanna-
Oh, a longer, okay, I see what you're
Larger
See what I'm
Yes.
saying?
So
Go from
make it- I would be
2,000 to
fine with
3,000 or
4,000 feet too.
2,500.
2,600 feet would get you half a mile.
All right.
Well, I just figured I'd throw
No,
it
you're
out
right,
there.
I apologize, you're right, yes.
Okay.
5,580.
So 1340 gets you.
I think it was a
640 gets you half mile.
good discussion,
There's more
thank you.
discussion needed, because they're gonna say that you're targeting convenience stores and what you're basing.
I gotta
that
be
on.
honest with you, I think the things that surround the convenience stores are targeting and destroying neighborhoods. So I think that that's gonna have to be a toss-up, where we have to realize that, let's look at Bleecker Street, for example. I mean, how many issues have we had over the years with that corner store? We've had to put no parking in front of there's been shootings, there's been this, there's been that. I mean, this is a chance that I'd be willing to take. I mean, we've been sued for a lot less things, so.
Okay, I think
don't have a
we're
problem.
gonna be complete. What we wanna do now is take a break. We'll probably start back up, with our,
5 minutes break, we'll start 5 minutes, 6.
yeah, our pre-meeting conference. We don't have much in the pre-meeting conference. Maybe we could revisit, what is it left in committee, quick? All right, thank you. Adjourned.
To be discussed in our pre-conference meeting.
Every gas station guy out of it.
Judge?
Like the guns.
Hello?
I think that you gotta give him a handicap for his age, you know?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. All right, our first piece is proposed ordinance number 1. It's an E&A transfer. I think it's last fiscal year cleanup. Am I correct? Oh, I'm sorry to bother you with your mouth full.
I'll speak to
We
it,
have on
yeah.
E&A. Is
So-
that end of year cleanup?
Correct.
Just say
It's-
yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody opposed in this end of year cleanup? Okay, I'm sorry to bother you, Mike. Please accept my apology.
Sorry. I'm going to noisy chocolate, sorry.
Our next piece of legislation is Restore New York grant application. We do have Chris Lawrence here to answer any questions on it. Is there any questions on that legislation? It's resolution number 2.
I have
My
a-
question was, yeah, they're providing the match, so.
All set? Any other questions?
This is nothing but a resolution saying that we approve of them applying for this grant and encumbers us in no other way, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. We're on resolution number 3, honorary street sign. And this was for Joe Moskal?
Yeah.
On
Joseph
Cornelia
Moskal?
Place. And we hyphenate, we're not changing the sign, we're just hyphenating, correct?
Hyphenate.
Meaning that we're
The
putting-
memorial, right.
putting an
We're not
additional-
changing the actual name on the
Okay.
street.
Okay.
Just memorial.
And this is in your district, Kate?
Yes. He was an alderman back in the day and, yeah, had land over by Kennedy Plaza, so they honored him. It used to be up, but the sign's been gone since Kennedy Plaza switched over.
So the sign was there?
A long time ago, but we have no records of it. But they had a Joseph Moskal Day and everything. It was in the newspaper, but there was no actual proclamation that was legally found
Very
in
good.
records from the 70s.
Are there any other questions on this legislation?
Are you gonna amend this to say we're not changing the street name?
Absolutely, Your Honor, we
So
just,
it's gotta be amended.
this doesn't say anything
We
about
have to?
replacing the
No.
street sign.
Nothing about, it's just memorial. I can
As
find
long as
it.
it's still Cornelia
Well, I
Place.
guess
It's fine as written.
As long as we follow the same pattern we did
Oh.
the last.
Yeah, do you?
That's
I'll-
correct, Your Honor.
Full
Could
council?
we make this a full council? Anybody object? Full council?
Thank you, Your Honor. Our next piece of legislation sponsored by Councilman Joseph Beatrice. It's a stop sign on Laurelwood Drive. Joey, want to give us a quick summary on it?
Yes, there was, the police did a study there, they sent a car there, Tamarack, there's a lot of young children, there's a lot of traffic going through, and the police decided that they, believe that there should be a stop sign from there, so I'm good with this.
Are there any questions for this legislation? Okay, let's move to number 5. Resolution, this is the resolution amending our zoning, calling for a public hearing for the 2,000 linear foot. We do have to put in there, our next council meeting, I'm assuming it's November 2nd, is that correct?
October?
Uh,
I would hope we meet in
No,
October.
I'm sorry.
I'm hoping we meet in
2nd.
October.
October what?
5th.
5th? Anybody opposed to the October 5th, public hearing?
November 6th,
No, October, I'm sorry.
October, you're right.
I'm sorry, we're a month too far ahead. We skipped October, me and Frankie. All right, very good public hearing. And there's any other questions discussions on a public hearing? Okay. The following legislation is the proposed ordinance number 6, and that is the ordinance that has to be referred to committee.
You know, one thing that we did talk about during the committee meeting is, do we want to make this 2,600 feet instead of 2,000?
Let's start with this because I already passed the planning board.
Oh, okay.
And if there's something that we can change in the future, if we don't think this is working, we'll add it. I think.
Wait a second, so it passed the planning board even though we ourselves haven't considered it yet?
No, we
It got
we
recommended
recommended it.
by
Okay.
the planning board recommended that you
Oh.
pass the ordinance
It
or
came in that direction. Okay, all right, thank you.
Our next piece is, some pieces are coming out of legislation, out of committee of the whole. If you go to your list, ordinance number 9, 713 and 715 Oswego Street. Is everybody okay with that? Well, after a public hearing, I'd like to pull that out of committee. The next piece is ordinance number 11, 3-5 Waverly Place. Also like to pull that out for sale. Ordinance 13, 1502, 1506 Miller Street. That I would like to pull out for sale. Ordinance number 15, 35 Faxton Street. Like to pull that out for sale. Ordinance number 22, Lee Street. I'd like to pull that out for
Nope.
sale.
That's not in the public hearing
No.
tonight.
That's a no. Okay, we leave that in committee.
Planning board. Yeah.
The next one's the Harbor Lock Road one. I think that the public hearing is not until November 2nd. That stays in committee, is that correct? Okay. The next one is amending ordinance number 26, amending zoning code. Would you like to refer that to committee also?
I'd like to bring it out on the floor just long enough to amend it, so we have a better way of wording it from Corporation Council. I'd like to get it appropriately worded.
So you want to amend it, bring it out, amend it, then refer it back to
And then refer it back to committee, but also pass a resolution asking the planning board to consider it, once we have a good amended version.
Okay, that's up to council. You can amend it on the floor, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. There's a proclamation for East Utica Classic. Samantha, did you sponsor that?
Yeah, they're coming October 19th.
All right, we leave it in committee till
Yep.
October 19th. There's 2 additional grants. I'm assuming that the information was received. Resolution number 19, resolution 20. Chris Lawrence is here. Are there any questions on both of those grants?
Those are actually being applied for by the city.
Okay. Are there any questions for Brian Thomas or Chris Lawrence on the Restore New York grants? Yep. Okay. Any questions?
I have a quick question on Lee Street.
Go ahead.
Obviously, we're not calling for the public hearing on that tonight, but
Right.
what is the process on that? Because that's the ordinance accepting property in the Harbor Point area as a public street.
I'd like to refer to our corporate counsel on that one.
That's the one where it says Lee Street on the Harbor Point Development Corporation memo. That's the one that we couldn't read, I believe, the last meeting.
What's your question?
Did we call for what's the process on that one? Like, what do we have to do with this? Is there a public hearing that has to
We
be?
did
That
have
all-
2 public hearings.
Yeah,
on
they're
both
both
cases.
on for public hearing. They both have to go to planning board,
Right, so when
November 2nd on both.
is that? It's November 2nd?
because it hasn't gone, it didn't meet, it didn't go down in time for planning board, so it's on the October planning board agenda.
Okay, so I just want, so who is supposed to advertise for that? That's why I'm asking this, so that we don't screw it up.
Hold on.
It's the
ahead.
council's public hearing,
Hearings.
so it should be the city clerk that advertises the public hearing as she would any.
Okay, so that one's outside the normal
Put it on your
like,
calendar.
process, so let's note that down that we advertise for those. They were passed for November 2nd at the prior meeting. Make sure that we contact the OD with enough time. All right, thanks. All right, cool, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other discussion on legislation coming out of committee of the whole? Okay, guys.
Well, so as long as we have a couple minutes?
We got 45 minutes. Would you like to discuss other business?
No, I wanted to so the piece that we have in committee, my piece on amending the zoning ordinance, which we now have we have better language on. I'm gonna bring it out in order to change that language, stick it back in. But what are people's thoughts then about going ahead and asking the planning board formally for them to do what they are required to do, which is to give us their opinion?
Well, Celeste, you can amend it in committee,
Right.
okay? And then when you're ready, you can submit it with the amendment, and then Mr. President will call for a vote.
Right, but it has to go to the planning board before we can vote on it.
Okay, so.
So what I'm asking for is if we
so
change,
You want a separate piece then, you want a resolution
correct,
that's asking for it.
that would ask the planning, a
Well-
resolution from the council asking the planning board for their opinion.
If that piece was on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
right, you could make a motion on the floor to refer it to the Commissioner of Economic Development
Mhm.
for referral to the planning board
Okay.
in its current form.
Right, okay.
That would fit Division 8 that Judge sent us all, you know. If you do that by motion and the council votes on it, then the council is taking that action and it will go
Right,
to the planning board.
But I don't want to do
You
it
don't
in
need it
its-
on paper.
I don't want to do it in its current form. I want to do it in the form in which I would be amending it to.
So amend it first.
Right.
And then you would make the motion to
Right.
refer to commissioner.
So what I'm asking is how
Yeah.
people are, what are people's thoughts about that? I'm not going to bring it up for a vote if
Well, we
nobody
don't know
wants
what's
to.
your amendment. Why don't you share?
Oh, okay. So it's just a very simple rewording that Corporation Counsel did just to make it, you remember that she said this last time, that it could be worded a little bit better. So ordained section, and I also had the section number wrong. So ordained section 2-29-125 of the Utica City Code regarding the zoning code use table is hereby amended by deleting the entry, quote, SP, end quote, for gasoline/convenience stores in the neighborhood mixed-use district. That's the new wording of that of that piece of legislation. If we change that language tonight, so that we have an ordinance which is well worded from a legal point of view, and we keep it in committee, obviously, I would like to pass a resolution just sending it along to the planning board through the commissioner in order to get their opinion on it, as is the process.
I'm not in favor of that at all.
Okay?
So you, can I?
No.
Yeah.
I just want to.
So,
To
to me, this takes business away in a lot of other areas. I know this is all about what's going on in South Utica. You, over the last year, you've been very critical of council members here about how you went through the zoning code. We read 162 pages. We didn't do our justice when it came down to chickens. We didn't do our justice when we had a problem. And all of a sudden now, you seem to have a problem in your area, which I understand, and I think the people have every right. And all of a sudden, we're gonna change the zoning code. That's my problem. I'm for businesses, you know, and I get it that, you know, sometimes it's in a residential area. And I think the people in South Utica and every place in Utica should have the right to come out and talk, and they shouldn't be able to just do something. But I'm not really, maybe I don't really understand what you wanna do, but I think this pertains to a lot of other areas in the city
It does.
besides South Utica, and I think you could hurt a lot of businesses
Right,
this way.
right.
So I'm nothing personal, I'm just not for that right now.
Okay, so can I answer that? Because I think that that's a good argument, and I'm glad that you raised it, because I think it actually sort of brings to the surface important stuff. So, yes, this is prompted by the Stewart's proposal to come to South Utica, but what that has sort of illustrated to me is a flaw we made, all of us collectively, sort of the law of unintended consequences, that when we passed the zoning ordinance back a year and a half ago, we didn't consider carefully enough what all of the consequences would be of that. And it means that we could put gas stations, new gas stations, into residential neighborhoods. And I know that the commissioner and I disagree over whether an NMU designation is residential. It says residential right in the description of an NMU, so I consider it a kind of residential neighborhood. And I think, you know, had I thought of this 6 months ago, I probably would have done something similar. You're right that the current situation with Stewart's has kind of bubbled it up to the surface. But I actually think that as a general matter, we shouldn't build gas stations in any kind of residential neighborhoods. So, and you know, because Stewart's has made this proposal, I became aware of that problem, which I could have thought about when we passed the zoning code. I didn't. It could have occurred to me 6 months ago. It didn't. It sort of took the Stewart's to make me go, oh, wait a second. I don't think that we should have these in NMU neighborhoods.
Brian, can you define mixed use
Neighborhood
districts?
It's not, let me say one other thing.
Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
You keep saying residential, isn't it mixed use? Aren't we correct? You're
Which-
saying mixed
It's
use.
like
Which
state.
includes residential.
Okay. but
It is a
so-
type of residential neighborhood.
Right, but you're putting the two of them together, so.
Well,
And-
no, the neighborhood mixed use puts the two of them together. So neighborhood mixed
Well,
use,
Again, so we have a zoning
Right.
problem again, that you, and I'm not trying to point fingers, but you belittled this council about chickens and hens, and you belittled this council about the convenience store on Rutgers Street, that we didn't do our homework and read it, and you praised yourself, and you read 162 pages, and you knew it in and out. Now, as soon as we have a problem, we're gonna change things. I got a little bit of a problem with that.
yeah, I think that that's fair. I get where you're coming from.
Okay.
I read it carefully and I didn't,
And
Now it's my turn to finish, and now it's my turn to finish. I read it carefully, and I didn't foresee every possible logical consequence of that zoning code. And any law that we pass, we should all be open to the idea that if we didn't get it right, we're gonna go back and tweak it.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying that you stressed your point. Me, I think we did a terrible job as a council. Part of it was pandemic, part of it was we were meeting, through Skype. We should have went through that the way we go through the budgets. We should have had every section should have been brought up, because every time we look at it, I'm not a Wall Street lawyer, and that 162-page document is very confusing. You're gonna even admit that it's confusing now, okay? When you expressed how you read it, page by page, and you're a professor. I'm a soda man. So that's how confusing that is. So
Well,
I
do want to
understand.
apologize if I gave the impression that I think I'm perfect. I don't.
No, I'm not saying that.
I
I'm not
didn't
saying
think
that,
that I
but
read it perfectly.
I'm not saying
I
that
read
at
it
all.
carefully.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just telling you the way it came across, all of it. And I don't want to shut anybody's businesses down. I want to see us increase our tax base and open businesses. So that's just my opinion, and nothing personal, it's just how I feel.
My question was neighborhood mixed-use district? Can you define it?
Yes.
Want me to read
So
it?
I'll read just right out of the zoning ordinance itself, the definition of neighborhood mixed use. They are vibrant neighborhoods that allow for a mix of residential dwelling unit types, commercial services, parks, and community facilities. This district reflects the walkable and historic nature of Utica's neighborhoods. Commercial uses in the NMU district complement the dense residential neighborhoods in the adjacent residential mixed or RM neighborhoods.
So I'm assuming that the gas station across the street is in a neighborhood mixed-use district also, is that correct?
It's actually not. It looks like there was an error. It should have been,
Oh, it should have been, right?
but it actually looks like it's in a residential mixed neighborhood.
Okay,
But it would have been grandfathered in no matter what.
Correct.
right. Okay.
For 2 years.
I like that
All
grandfather
right.
term.
I believe, Councilman Mule, that gas station did come up during all this review as well. I don't know if it was on the floor, but
I did.
I don't know that was an error, so.
Okay, I'm hoping that we correct that error very soon.
I have one question.
Wait, guys, we like every council member to speak. Mark, you have the floor.
Yeah, so my question is, it's about stewards, and we haven't even we're back from the planning board yet, or the historical thing, on top of it. And if we change something midstream when stewards has already been building stuff, or whatever they're doing, because it's a circle around apparently, that's what I'm gathering.
Because they're zoned for it, and they did all the paperwork.
They would be grandfathered in.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I mean.
They're already grandfathered in
why
anyways.
is the council getting involved right now when it's not our play right now?
I agree with you
And
wholeheartedly.
if we change law midstream when they're trying to do something, could that come back and haunt us? I don't know.
I
just
think there
asked
would be a
that question.
potential lawsuit there, I agree.
I don't know, and if we're changing something premature before the historic site might turn it down, or the planning board, what's that, I mean, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Are we setting ourselves up to be sued by the city as a council? I don't know. I just asked that question.
Well, our colleague, Celeste will be announcing anyway, September 26th is the Scenic Historic at 4 o'clock in these chambers concerning the Genesee Street appropriations for that project. Other than that, like you said, Councilman, I agree with you. I think we should leave it alone.
I'm just curious. I mean, if we tried to change the law midstream and they've been working on it for 6 months, apparently,
It's called ex post facto.
I mean,
Can't do it.
wow. I mean, it's almost like the Coleman Center 102, you know what I mean? It's like, change the ordinance again? I don't know. I just don't get it, so.
The Calverman Center didn't follow the zoning code, but that's a whole.
I remember it was a big show, I remember it was a crap, nasty show.
Samantha, would you like to have the floor?
Yeah, so I guess just a couple of things for clarification.
Shoot.
Neighborhood retail states that it excludes gas stations with pumps, right? So I guess if you go back to that table and you look at what the permitted use is, I think that you maybe change it from a permitted use to a special permit, it would still have to go through site plan review, but would also need a special use permit in order to go into.
That's what it's going through now.
That's what it is, now.
It's special, it's a special permit?
SP, yep.
SP, okay. So then really, there's not much that you can do other than actually changing
The zoning,
the whole entire zoning.
correct.
Mhm.
Councilman DeBrango, Samantha, you all set? Councilman DeBrango, you have the floor.
The legislation or the ordinance amending the zoning code, the one that Celeste wants to bring out, that would affect a lot more streets, like maybe James Street. I would assume that's the same. That would affect Herkimer Road. I'm not sure, I don't have the map in front of
I
me.
do have the map up here if you
But-
want to look at it.
You know what I mean? We may be affecting some streets that are, that may want a convenience store or gas station there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, we already have one on Herkimer Road, Oriskany Boulevard it may affect. So I think by doing this, it's gonna affect the whole city, citywide. I don't think we should press this issue right now.
I think
That's
that's-
my opinion, because
I think that's
maybe
fair.
other council persons would like a convenience store / gas station in their district. I don't know that, I don't have it in front of me, but I'd like to see how many districts it affects before we actually even vote on it. That's my opinion. That's all.
I think that's fair.
Okay, Councilwoman Katie, I always have the floor.
Yeah,
Then
I-
Joey, you have it after that.
Pretty much just wrapping it up. I just wanted to echo that because my district does have things like State Street and a little bit more of the commercial feel. Not saying it's zoned that way, but I would want more time with constituents if we were actually going to look into that first.
Okay, at this time, Councilwoman, I don't think you have support.
So I would like to just pull it long enough to amend it and
You
stick
can
it
always
back.
amend it next time you pull it out. Doesn't really
Well,
matter.
or let's just get it amended tonight and get it into the form that's the appropriate form. But you, Mr. President, said I could amend it while
Co-
it's in committee?
Well, may I have the floor?
Changed your committee
Chair?
rules.
All right.
Mr. President, you have the
Sir,
floor.
Thank you. I was just gonna state that whatever motions you would like to make them on the floor, and you're at the decision of the body, right? So if you make a motion to pull it out, it gets 5 votes, it's out. If
Yeah, I
you have the
would-
votes to amend it, that's, you know, all right, thank you.
So could we amend it at the next committee of the whole?
If that's what you would like to do.
Yes. So let's amend it at the next committee of the whole, whenever we meet next.
Okay. Is there any other discussions, any other legislation, any other business? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Beatrice.
On the whole zoning. So we've been here since, the whole time we've been here, we're talking about this zoning code. Seems like we have a lot of problems with this zoning code. Is there any way that we could pull this zoning code out and go through it and redo it? Because we have, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny,
It's
but,
funny.
but we have it's total chaos. Everything that comes up, okay, he asked a question about the Hess station. Well, it slipped through the cracks. It was a mistake. We have a problem over on, I don't think, and I'll speak for myself, I don't think we did a very, very good job thoroughly going through it. And I think Celeste, even what we're talking about tonight, we have to agree on it, okay? And, I'm just asking, is there something that we could do to go through this zoning code? I don't care if we have a meeting once a month to go through a chapter and go through it and say, this is what's going on, let's correct it because it's wrong.
It's not.
Not that it's wrong, it's just,
It's actually a very good document. The problem is that you have certain issues that come up that affect certain people. So unfortunately, and what you'll see is this zoning document, which again was passed in its form, being changed now based on issues that come up, so such as convenience stores. So you can't just pull a whole living document to amend it. You're going to have to, so maybe like the next council that comes in might want gas stations on Genesee Street. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to take it on a like say we change the convenience store legislation. That doesn't mean that the next council comes in,
Right.
doesn't remove that back out of the zoning.
right, so
code.
you're saying change it by the
You
situation.
have to change it by the situation, but this
Okay.
situation in particular, the Stewart situation is a very difficult situation because you had Stewarts apply for their application in a district that was zoned for that. So because they've already put in their application.
You can't do nothing.
You cannot. It's an actual, it's
Right.
law. You can't change something after the fact that it's already been applied.
Right.
And even if Celeste passed this legislation tonight, it will not affect Stewart's going to Genesee Street. And the planning board will have to
Go
abide
by
by this
that
living
article.
document no matter what.
Right.
So again, I mean, taking a look maybe at the zoning map and seeing maybe what areas, but again, how many more places are Stewart's or a gas station gonna be put inside the city in those types of neighborhoods?
Right, but it's not just I'm just saying,
I
from the
know,
time
I'm
we
saying
passed
any
it, we've
gas-
had
any
not
gas
between chickens, seems like everything that comes up, well, that wasn't in the old code, but it's in this
But
zoning,
Joe,
and then
that's-
just,
and that's part of the problem too, is because a lot of the documents that the council had amended in the previous zoning code was now changed when this zoning document was passed. I mean, I remember even sending emails to this body about heavy industrial, light industrial, what specifically, how that affected those neighborhoods. So there was a lot of time, effort, and money that was put into this, and I wouldn't even say to this body for passing it that they were wrong, because you weren't gonna know a Stewart's issue was gonna come up. With that said, we do know that there's issues as far as convenience stores and stuff like that, and it's our responsibility to take that and now amend it to where we feel it's best needed.
All right,
Does that make sense?
yes,
Some
very
of your
much so.
Joey's
Very well
guys,
said.
there's some of your colleagues that like to get the floor. You guys also? All right. Go ahead.
I just want to, I mean, I think Joe's right, though, that even if it's not about changing things or quote-unquote fixing things, I think that we as a body, when we pass this, didn't do enough to sort of really sit down with the professionals and talk about, like, what is the overall picture here? Like, part of the thing I was in, and Joe was in the same situation, I didn't have an old zoning code by which I could judge the new zoning code. So to think about what are the consequences, and that's why we're falling into this law of unintended consequences. There are consequences, it turns out, that we couldn't consider because some of us were new to the process, and I think it would have behooved all of us at the time to have said, hey, Mr. Commissioner, can you bring in the architect firm or whatever kind of firm, the planning firm, to come in and really talk in, like, let's see the forest for the trees, right? So don't, like, we did a lot of tree work, but now, like, what's the bigger scope and we didn't ask those kind of questions so that we couldn't sort of think through what were some of the long-term consequences. I think Mr. Beatrice is absolutely right about that. And I think even if we're not going to change anything, because I think Sam may be right too, that we can only change it as we go along and find particular problems, but still it would benefit us as a council to sit down and get a better sense from professionals, like, what are the big things that they were trying to do? Did it accomplish that? What are the bigger goals that we have for going from 21 districts to 11 districts? What made it a green code? I mean, there are, like, just lots of things that I think we could understand better as a body that would make us better as a body and therefore better representatives.
Thank you, Councilman.
I'm all for Joe.
All right, thank you. Corporate Counsel, Stephanie DiGiorgio, you have the floor.
I was just gonna say, we're talking about a very extensive document, so there's always gonna be things that either get missed, typos. I mean, we're just talking about a huge document anyways. So you're gonna have those things, and when they come up, you deal with them. But, I think as people said, I mean, there are a lot of unintended consequences, but you can't predict everything. You're not gonna know everything. So what you have is what you have, and until something, changes. But again, when you're looking at the zoning code, you have to look at it, in its entirety, citywide. When you start dissecting it in sections, it starts to get very problematic because you're not looking at it for the city, you're looking at it for a specific area. So that was my only comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much. President Galimi, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something general about the zoning code. One, we did do quite a bit of review. And I think everyone is being pretty hard on themselves, saying, oh, I missed this, I missed that. We notified the public through the water board. For multiple years, even prior to this council, we were on the radio going through painstaking details about where sheds can go and where literally every little bit of this. And I watched the council, even through COVID, every single one of you, go through a lot of that. You brought in Brian, you asked a million questions, but it does say right in the actual zoning code that it's recommended that the Common Council and its people continually review it and actually go through it on a regular basis, because zoning is not meant to be permanent. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, and it's just part of the process. That's just general. It even says it right in there. So, review away. That's why we're all council people, right? So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, President Galimi. Councilman Clausen Montesser, you have the floor.
I just wanted to say that maybe if we start with the use tables and kind of go through and have Brian, you know, explain, maybe start with residential, lodging, automotive, kind of just give a generalized, you know, explanation of what that entails. I think that would probably be your best bet as far as moving forward in explanation to the council. And also, I mean, it is a lot, and I think that once people understand what the specific zones in the districts mean and what it could be allowed, I think it's a better understanding when explaining what type of use goes to those neighborhoods.
And the zoning board should be,
Well,
I mean, honestly, the zoning board too should be, you know,
you know, they gotta be held liable for a lot of things too, to let things happen before it happens, so, you know.
and a lot of times, he was saying like for convenience stores, like allowing 3 in Oneida Square because they did get a permitted use. Like I understand what you're saying in regards to that, and I think that even from the planning or zoning board aspect, a lot of these times, if there's not an issue, they just say, okay, here we go, I'm not gonna deny this application, and then have to go to court because no one's complaining about it. But I think that we do have to hamper down on convenience stores, smoke shops, so on and so forth, when moving forward. But I think that's about as far as you're getting with this document, you know, moving forward.
all right, is there any other discussions on this?
Make a motion to.
Close?
Caucus.
Okay, Mike, we'll start prompt at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Quick question, did we just extend this for another night?
September 21st, 2022. We're going to call this regular meeting of the Common Council to order. Deputy Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Aiello, Burmaster, Friend, Miola, Irvin, Beatrice, Williamson, Clausen, Testa, DeBrango, all present.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence for the deceased members of the council. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the first order of business this evening are the minutes from the last meeting. We do have them posted on E-Code 360.
I want to read them tonight.
Make a motion.
I'll second.
Are you making a motion to dispense or read?
Dispense.
Okay, thank you. Motion was,
It's a short meeting, I figured we had time,
the second was Williamson. Any opposed? Okay, the council has accepted the minutes of the previous meeting and dispensed with the reading. We're going to hold the public hearing and deal with those properties, and then right after the public hearing, we are going to start with the honorary street sign, as Don Moskal is here to speak, and the council will deal with that first, right after the public hearing. We do have a public hearing this evening on proposed ordinance 9, 713 and 715 Oswego Street, ordinance 11, 3 to 5 Waverly Place, 13, 1502 and 1506 Miller Street, and ordinance 15, 35 Faxon Street. No one signed up to speak on behalf of those properties, so the public hearing is now closed. Do we have a motion to remove ordinance 9,
Make a motion.
sale of 713, 7-15 Oswego Street from committee? Did you guys get that? Any opposed to pulling that from committee?
That's 7:15.
Okay. Just give me a second to pull them so I can read through them as they come through. No one's opposed. Ordinance number 9 is on the floor for a vote. It is the sale of 713 and 715 Oswego Street to Americo D. Romero for a sum of $500 from the URA. Public hearing was just held. Your votes.
9 E's adopted.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to remove ordinance 11? Miola and Burmaster. Any opposed? It's on the floor. This is the sale of 3-5 Waverly Place to Jeanette Martinez for a sum of $8,500 from the URA.
9 E's adopted.
Thank you. Any comment on this, Commissioner? Good? All right.
No, fine.
Proposed ordinance 13, we have a motion from Burmaster, second from Venice Urban. Any opposed from pulling from committee? All right, ordinance 13 is the sale of 1502 and 1506 Miller Street for a sum of $17,426 from URA to Joyra 2 and Gaylor Pa. Your votes.
9 E's adopted.
Proposed ordinance 15.
Make a motion.
All right. Second from Friend. Any opposed? It's on the floor for a vote. This is the sale of 35 Faxon Street for a sum of $30,000 from the URA to Abderham Awu Walinu and Sophia Osman. Your votes.
9 E's adopted.
All right. That concludes the properties that were sold after the public hearing. All right, so the next order of business is proposed resolution 3. Which is Mr. Moskal, I'll ask you to come up for comment after the council votes on this measure. So thank you. Proposed resolution number 3 is sponsored by council members Miola and Williamson.
Motion.
All right. Full council, okay, the full council's on this now. This is the placement of an honorary street sign for Joseph Moskal on Cornelia Place. Whereas Joseph Moskal was a longtime resident and businessman of the city of Utica and served as a member of the City of Utica Common Council for 20 years, and whereas there previously was an honorary street sign erected at Kennedy Circle that has since been removed, and be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Utica authorizes the placement of an honorary street sign naming Cornelia Place as Moskal Place on Cornelia Place and Genesee Street, and Cornelia Place and Cornelia Street to posthumously honor and recognize Joseph Moskal for his many years of dedicated service to the city. Now therefore be it resolved that this resolution be inscribed in the minutes of the Common Council meeting of September 21st, 2022.
Is there a motion, a second, Mr. President?
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Your votes?
Nine E's adopted.
Thank you. Mr. Moskal, if you could come to the podium, or we can, can we, all right, there we go. And you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
My name is Donald Moskal. I'm the son of my deceased father, Joseph Moskal, who was, as you heard, an alderman for 20 years. I'm here today because I want to thank Mayor Palmieri for his arrangements that he made for us, and also all the council people here that voted for the Moskal sign, and also besides those that have voted for my father. I also want to thank Mayola and Williamson for sponsoring, and also for Yellow, Iola, and Bergmeister for their assistance also. Without all these people, all the council members, this would not be able and realistic. So I thank you wholeheartedly to all of you today, and continue to do your best in whatever you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending this evening. It's appreciated. All right, we're going to go back to the regular order of business. So that we're arriving at public comment period.
Clear the board, clerk.
What was that?
Clear the board.
Oh, clear the board, yes. Thank you. I believe this says Richard Rodrigo?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
me.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please approach. The Common Council has provided you a copy of Section 3244, Public Comment Period Rule. You'll probably have to raise that microphone up. Please state your name for the record, and then you may begin. Thank you.
My name is Richard Rodrigo. I represent the Cornerstone Church. Every night we feed the homeless people. And the homeless people, unfortunately, they don't have any place to relieve themselves. So I'm asking the Common Council if they could at least put some money towards affordable bathrooms. If they have the money like to fix up Valley View, then I'm sure they have some money for the money for them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next and last speaker this evening is Ron Vincent. The Common Council has provided you a copy of Section 3244, Public Comment Period Rule. Are you in agreement with this?
Yes, I am.
State your name and you may begin.
My name is Ron Vincent. I've been up here many a times talking about the green waste situation. Here we are, almost at the end of September. There's still green waste out there in the streets that was never picked up or taken care of since the end of winter. Now they're starting to put a product out there in the streets, getting ready for the fall pickup, even though it's a month and a half early. I don't know what's going on, but there's some streets where people are trimming trees, putting them out, turning a 2-lane street into a 1-lane street. Some of these have been out there for over 2 months. I don't know if they should have been picked up or written up or cited for not putting them up, or for putting them out after the time was up, or maybe they should be cited for putting them out 2-3 months before the next pickup. I don't know whose responsibility it is to see this. In North Utica, I don't think I've seen a codes department car around all summer long. There's police cars around all the time, but I've never seen a codes car. I asked my neighbors that are complaining, when you see these codes people, stop them, tell them, say, hey, look, the house down the street, that stuff's been there for 3-4 months. Maybe they'll cite the person and have it picked up. But they tell me the same thing, codes department, I haven't seen one this year. Maybe they're busy worrying about building more gas stations and all the formalities that they gotta go through for that. Just like tonight, I mean, the debating that's been going on about this, going on for hours and hours and hours. It's like the green waste problem in the city of Utica has just been put on the back burner and people don't care about it. And it's not just North Utica. I've taken a ride around the other parts of the city. I've talked to a lot of people, and they're all telling me the same thing. Oh yeah, they got tree branches out there with leaves on it that are all turned brown and fall off. And that's sort of in the summertime when something like that happens. That means it's been there for a couple, 3 months. I don't know. I tell them to call the mayor's office. I tell them to call the codes department. I don't know if the people are just saying, why bother? But I wish that everybody here, common council people, maybe if you see them in your areas, like everybody else is seeing them in my area, do what you gotta do. Call who you gotta call. Let your constituents know. Maybe they're calling you. But, you know, this is craziness. I think the first time we get a snowfall, it'll probably be the first time the streets in the city of Utica will be cleaned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker this evening. We have no other guests scheduled. We do not have communications from the mayor this evening. Reports from the city officers. Deputy Chief Noonan.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Corporation Counsel Stephanie DiGiorgio.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas.
Nothing to report.
Assistant Chief Noon.
Nothing to report.
Okay, closes the reports from city officers. Do we have any cash reports?
No cash report tonight.
Okay, we're on petitions, remonstrances, and appeals. First District, Councilmember Keeney Ayala, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to thank the Moskal family for coming out tonight. I'm glad we were finally able to honor your father. And I enjoyed getting to learn more about his story and all his time as a council member, alderman, as they called it. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everybody this Saturday at Handshake City is the Downtown Get Down. So there's going to be the Touch a Truck at 10 a.m. and 11:30 is the helicopter landing, and 2 p.m. will be live music, food, beer. It'll be a fun time. So that's over on Water and Division Street. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Second District, Councilmember Robert Burmaster, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. To adjust Ron there, I talk to Marcus all the time in codes. He's told me they've issued over 200 tickets to people who put greenway in the streets and not in buckets. If the city has to take them away, they've taken them away. They bill the landlord, and I guess it's incorporated in their taxes, but I could be wrong. And I know in my area, I am on the phone all the time with Marcus, and he has been a godsend. I'd like to see the council in the future maybe take and and do away with the sweeps in the spring and October and have it year-round bucket and we won't have this problem of when do we do it and when do we don't, but that's for another day. But that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Third District, Councilmember Celeste Friend, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree as well that Marcus and his department have done a great job of trying to respond to the green waste. I also recognize it's a problem. I wouldn't take it away, the loose collection, the entire year. I think when leaves fall, that does present, having a bucket-only situation when leaves fall would in fact present a hardship to a lot of people who have a lot of trees. But I agree that it's a problem and that the council ought to sort of visit the question and think about what might be a better arrangement. I do want to remind people that the Scenic and Historic Commission meets this Monday, and they will be taking up the question of the Stewarts in South Utica. That meeting is here in council chambers at 4 p.m. Monday the 26th. So all who are interested in that issue, for it or against it, are encouraged to attend that meeting. It is not a public hearing, so the public doesn't have the ability to weigh in, but they certainly have the ability and are encouraged to attend. And that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Majority Leader and Fourth Ward Councilperson Frank Miola, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was there at the infancy stage where we started doing these green waste in these buckets time. So I remember they wanted to only give us 2 buckets, so I fought for getting us a hell of a lot more than just 2 buckets because everybody's got different size lots that they got to cut, properties. But the reason why there wasn't ever a certain date is because we never know what Mother Nature is going to do. So sometimes fall comes early and sometimes fall comes late. And that's the call of our DPW commissioner. He makes the call on that and he follows through. So when people are raking out leaves and they don't have enough containerized, when they get trees are coming all over the place, that's the reason why they don't do it all year round. So at this time, we'll probably see an announcement within a few months, maybe even earlier, it depends on Mother Nature, from our DPW Commissioner Dave Short, and we can let everybody know. Throw the leaves out on the road, the city's going to be there to pick it up. Thank you.
Thanks. Fifth District, Vice Urban.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have anything tonight.
Thank you very much. Sixth District, Joe Beatrice.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I want to address, I was going to have nothing tonight, but after public commentary, I have plenty to talk about. So piggybacking on what Mr. Burmaster said, we've had in North Utica 300 citations. And as far as a codes officer, we have our own codes officer in North Utica who's there every day. So if anybody wants to call me, I will give you the codes officer's name and number so you can call him and track him down if you want to know where he is. Furthermore, as far as green waste pickup starts on the week of October 3rd. So the people in North Utica, we have our pickups on Sunday. That's when your pickup will be there. And if anybody's out there listening, I know I talk to people every week. If there is a certain house that you see excess green waste on, please call me and I will be sure that it gets picked up. You need to understand that when they cite people, it's not done that day. But there's no excuse that stuff should be out there from May till now. I agree with that 100%. But there is, I know I talk to people on a weekly basis, sometimes more. And if that question's ever needs to be raised, talk about that, just feel free to talk to me and I'll make sure everything's taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Minority Leader and Council at Large, Mark Williamson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing to pass.
Thank you. Council at Large, Samantha Claus-Montesti, you have the floor.
I've got nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you.
Just kidding, no.
President Pro Tem and Council at Large Frank DeBrango.
No comment tonight, thank you.
Thank you.
The zoning code really got the best of me today.
I have 2 things that have come up today that I want to comment on. First is green waste. I know a lot of the public is watching. We send out letters, we send out note cards, we have TV commercials. The city does quite a bit to notify the city, while it is confusing sometimes, about the schedule and the pickups. And I'm speaking to the public right now, and I'm sure if I want to run for something else at some point or stay involved, people will beat me over the head for this, but I would request that the public pay attention to the schedule a little bit better, because if it's the middle of the summer and you're dumping grass clippings and hedges and half trees and everything else under the sun in the road, it's on you. And if you're getting cited, it's because you're doing something that does not agree with the ordinances we've passed as the Common Council. So if you're confused on the schedule, please call Department of Public Works, the mayor's office. We have it available, and as soon as we can put things out in the road, let's do it on the schedule that is posted. And as soon as we're not supposed to any longer, please containerize it, because then it just ends up in the snowbanks. So just, the commercials will be out soon, and let's pay attention to that schedule.
Mr. President, may I say one thing also? No. You do have,
You gotta yield the floor.
oh,
Make a motion.
make a motion?
I'll second his motion.
All right.
Also,
Yeah, add something, please.
the public should know that if there's an over and abundance and they need stuff picked up, they can call solid waste.
Yes,
and
we've
they
mentioned that
will
multiple
come,
times,
and
yes.
they will come to pick it up
Exactly,
also.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make a motion to, so I can say one?
All right, hey,
Grass clippings never go directly there.
yeah, all right.
I'd like to make a motion.
So no one else is, no, I'm not processing any other motions, but seriously, it's a problem. All right, the next thing, and I do want to say something about this, because a public comment was made about the tent, people living in tents in Oneida Square right now. And I recognize what you're saying, what was said in public comment about people who do not and cannot relieve themselves inside. Now, what I want to say is, and here's the thing, this is not insensitive to people who do not have a place to sleep, do not have a place to be, cannot exist without the help that Pastor Ballman is giving. However, I have a backyard. If I started offering that backyard for people to live in tents in my backyard, and those people did not have a place to relieve themselves, it would be my responsibility to figure out how to do that. Now, your call to action with the council, what I would say is, please direct, and I'm going to direct this as well, that request to Pastor Ballman, because he is the person enabling this. And if he does need to go to the county or the city and request that he somehow needs funding for that, that's his responsibility, because ultimately he is creating that situation. And whether it is for good intentions, that's not my judgment. But my point is, if that is happening on that property and he is allowing these people to live in tents on that property, as the church is, the Cornerstone Church, please have Pastor Ballman direct that to the people necessary if he has trouble with that. Thank you. All right. That's all I have. Other than, there's a lot of positive things going on, but today I had a couple comments on the greenways and that. All right. Moving on to legislation. All right. The first thing on the order of business this evening is an E&A transfer. Proposed ordinance number 1. We have someone to move that. All right, Miola.
Second.
We have a second from Williamson. This is an E&A transfer to account for unexpected costs of fiscal services for borrowing and telephone and internet services. This is a 2021-2022 E&A transfer. It's an ordinance for a sum of, let's see, what's the total here?
Next year, cleanup.
It is a cleanup.
Judge missed his 61st
It's
home run.
$4,189 from contingency and $7,041 from liabilities and insurances going to bond and note services and general government telephone services. Your votes.
9 E's adopted.
Thank you. Proposed resolution number 2. Miola is the sponsor. We have a second?
Yep.
Williamson is the second. This is a Restore New York grant application, reinventing 131 Boston Place. This was reviewed in pre-meeting conference. So I will just read the parts that are mandated. Now therefore be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Utica hereby does approve and endorse the application of Oneida County for a grant through the Empire State Development Corporation for a project under the Restore New York program and for a project known as Reinventing 131 Boston Place. Be it further resolved that the Common Council of the City of Utica finds the proposed project to be consistent with the municipality's local revitalization plans, that the proposed financing is appropriate for the specific project, that the project facilities effective and efficient use of existing and future public resources so as to promote both economic development and preservation of community resources, and the project develops and enhances infrastructure and or other facilities in a manner that will attract, create, and sustain employment opportunities where applicable. Your votes.
9E's adopted.
Thank you. The next piece we already passed. Why don't I have the other pieces? Here we are. Okay. Next piece of proposed ordinance number 4, sponsored by Councilmember Beatrice. Is there a second? Multiple seconds, but we're going to go with Burmeister. Intersections where stops required. Be it ordained that section 216.358 Schedule C, intersections where stops required be amended to include the following. Laurelwood Drive at Tamarack Street intersection, southwest corner, to control eastbound traffic. Be it further ordained that the proper signs be erected where necessary. Your votes.
9E's adopted.
Proposed resolution is calling for a public hearing. It's resolution number 5.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that and date it for our next council meeting, October 5th, 2022, sir.
Do we have a second? Second is Councilperson Friend. It's on the floor for a vote. I will read. Now therefore be it resolved that the Utica Common Council shall conduct a public hearing on the proposed amendment at its regular meeting on October 5th, 2022, 7 p.m. in the Common Council Chambers, 1 Kennedy Plaza, Utica, New York, to provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions and offer comments on the proposed zoning text amendment. Immediately after the public hearing, the Utica Common Council may consider legislation that will amend the zoning ordinance to limit the ability of neighborhood retail establishments from locating within 2,000 linear feet of each other.
So, quick question, so am I not doing this now in the zoning code because we're passing this now?
It was already passed by the planning board.
This is the public hearing.
This is only the public
Just so
hearing
you're
for our
aware.
next council
Okay,
meeting.
so I don't have to make that amendment inside the zoning amendment?
No, if you want to change it, we have to change it after this. We've got to go through a public hearing again.
Okay, I just wanted to double check, so I'll keep that amendment in there then as well. Okay.
We're good?
Yep.
Your votes.
Oh, yeah.
9E's adopted.
Okay, so that public hearing will be on October 5th. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to move ordinance number 6 for the change in the local law for 2,000 linear foot into committee, sir.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, second from Williamson. Introduce and commit ordinance number 6. Any opposed? It's in committee. I believe we may have some things
Yes.
in committee.
In committee of the whole, Mr. President, I'd like to move proposition resolution number 19, Restoring New York Special Project.
Okay. Is there a second to pull that from committee? We have a second from Williamson. Any opposed? It is out of committee on the floor. Do you want me to summarize? Someone else wants to
If you would be so kind, Mr.
All right,
President.
thank you very much. Restore New York Special Project. Now therefore be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Utica, New York has considered the proposed Restore New York grant application funding proposal. The council finds that the funding of the proposed project is consistent with the city's 2011 master plan. Additionally, the council finds that the $10 million request is appropriate for both properties. The properties in question here are 239 Genesee Street and the building at 315 to 319 Court Street. The council also finds that the project develops and enhances infrastructure in existing buildings in a manner that will attract, create, and sustain employment opportunities. Be it further resolved that the Common Council hereby authorizes the mayor to submit this Restore New York project to the state of New York and authorizes the mayor to enter into any and all necessary agreements upon successful award of the funding proposal. Your votes.
Nine E's adopted.
Mr. President, I'd like to pull from committee proposed resolution number 20, restore New York Harbor.
Second.
Second. Any opposed? Okay, Restore New York Harbor is on the floor. I will summarize. The city is proposing to submit an application for the rehabilitation of the 1933 building at Harbor Point. Now therefore be it resolved that the Common Council of the City of Utica, New York has considered the proposed Restore New York grant application funding proposal. The council finds that the funding of the proposed project is consistent with the city's 2011 master plan, etc. Be it further resolved that the Common Council hereby authorizes the mayor to submit this Restore New York project to the state of New York and authorizes the mayor to enter into any and all necessary agreements upon successful award of the funding proposal. Your votes.
9 E's adopted.
Mr. President, if there's no more business, I'd like to ask for adjournment.
Second.
No one's opposed. Have a good evening. Thank you all for attending.